Hey everybody, this is Laurie Meyer from stampedgreetings.com. Today I want to show you how to make a very fun card that was introduced by an amazing demonstrator named Brandy Cox. She is part of the Creative 8 team, and she shared this really cool design in one of the recent Creative 8 retreats. She calls it a corner fun fold. And the one that she did is designed to look like the one that's here on the right. It's a portrait card. I took her measurements and tweaked it up just a little bit. It's the same exact kind of card, but as you can see, it's more of a landscape or a horizontal view. And look what happens. You open the card up and it pops up into an even bigger card. It uses quite a lot of space and just has a really, really fun effect. And I like it as well because you have 3 opportunities to put in sentiments or punch out images, whatever you want. You can add 3 different places of sentiments, or you can write your own greeting. So what I'm going to do today is show you the basics of how to form the card base. I'm not going to go through and show you everything that was done to make these cards. I really want to focus on how to make the cards. And I'm just going to get one of the horizontal ones out of the way. You're going to see that there are 2 different designs, but they're the exact same thing. As I showed you on the other card that popped up, this vertical card also pops up just the same way. It's the exact same style, the exact same steps, and I'm just going to take you through how to make each of these, and then you will have a great card base to do any kind of embellishments or stamping on. When I post this on YouTube, I will also add some instructions. And I'm going to go through these as we make this card base together. There will be one for the horizontal corner fold, which is obviously ones that are laid out like this. And then I have another version that I will also post that is for the vertical. And there are just a couple things to keep in mind when you're going from one to the other. This again is the vertical. But I'm going to start with the horizontal. And let's just look at what you need to make that fun fold card in a horizontal or a landscape view. And what you're going to need, you're going to start with a piece of designer series paper. And I do suggest designer series paper rather than cardstock. The designer series paper is not going to be super thick, and you're going to have a lot of layers in this. If you use designer series paper to do that card base, it might be a little thick to get into an envelope. This does fold down into a regular A2 size. So again, we're going to have designer series paper. It's going to be 8 1/4 inches wide and 7 inches tall. And I've already cut one. I have cut a piece from the gorgeous designer series paper that is part of the Country Floral Lane Suite. This is in the new mini catalog, and this is the paper that I'm going to be using on both cards. The paper is shown down here at the bottom. It's the Country Floral Lane 12 by 12 designer series paper, and it works perfectly for this kind of card and for many other projects. So a couple things to notice on here, and let me show you how this relates back to the diagram. See how I have the word design and I have an arrow pointing up? That's really important, and let me show you why. We're aiming for this card, and this is where we're starting. We've got the 8 1/4 by 7, and that design is going vertically. That means that when I open this card up, that my design looks intentional. I wouldn't want to open the card and have the design going upside down. That just wouldn't work well. So when you're prepping your paper, if your designer series paper has a pattern that needs to be vertical, make sure you look at the way in which this diagram is shown. So you know that the vertical pattern for the horizontal is going to go up like this. Okay, so to cut this piece of paper, I started with a 12 by 12, and this is now 7 inches, which means I took 5 inches off. This is now 8 1/4 inches wide, which means I took 3 3/4 inches off. Save the pieces that you have left from cutting your 12 by 12 piece. You will definitely be using those. In fact, you might even use them to decorate this card. The next thing that we're going to do is score. And I'm going to bring the instructions back in. So we're going to score this piece 3 times. One is coming in from the upper left. We're going to score at 2 3/4 inches. We're also going to score 2 3/4 inches from the top. And then we're going to do another score line, which is going to be a diagonal. That one we're going to have to do just a little bit of work to make sure that we get that at the 5 1/2 inch mark. And I'll show you a really quick trick to do that. But let's start with the first two, the 2 3/4 and the 2 3/4. Again, since I'm doing this as a horizontal corner fold card, I want to put my paper in so that the 8 1/4 is showing horizontally. I apologize for that shine. Move that down just a little bit. We're going to come in from the left, and at 2 3/4, we're going to score. And I like to start a score line very gently and just pull it down. Take your time. This will eliminate the possibility of your stylus getting out of the track. And we've got one of our score lines done. The one that we just did is this one. We now need to do this one. The easiest way to do that is to just take this piece of paper, rotate it to the left 90 degrees, because what we're going to be doing is we're going to be coming in 2 3/4 inches, and we're going to be scoring. So we're going to do the exact same thing that we did just a minute ago, 2 3/4 inches, and we're going to score that. This paper is really fun to work with. It has some awesome colors, some awesome designs that are appropriate for many, many different occasions. Yes, Valentine's Day comes to mind, anniversaries, weddings, engagements. I think it would be really nice for a pretty congratulations card, or a baby shower, or a wedding shower. Just a lot of different things that you can do. Before I take this piece out of my scoring board, I'm going to do just a little bit of work to prep to do this score line. And I've grabbed a pencil. I like keeping my paper in my scoring board when I need to make a tick mark on the paper. And I'm going to make a tick mark along the top piece right here. And I'm also going to make a tick mark down here. I've got a built-in ruler on both sides. I don't need to get another ruler out. I can do all my measurements right here. So based on the diagram, I need to go 5 1/2 inches from the top left, 5 1/2 inches from the top left. So I'm going to the right, and then I'm going down. So I'm just going to take my pencil, and I'm going to make a little pencil mark. Don't worry, we're going to erase that, so it will not be seen on the final product. And I'm just gonna, I am standing up. If I get my head in the way, you will know why. And I'm just making a little tick mark down there. So you can see I have my 2 tick marks at the 5 1/2 inch line. All right. The easiest way, I believe, to make the score line that we're going to need going from those 5 1/2 inch marks is to get out your paper trimmer. And if you don't have a Stampin' Up! Paper trimmer, and I was a late adopter, I will say that, this is an awesome tool. It comes with a cutting blade and a scoring blade, and we're going to use a scoring blade. And because I don't want to have any doubt of the blade that I'm going to use, I'm just popping out my cutting blade, and I'm going to put that over to the side. So the blade that I have in here is my scoring. And what I'm going to do is I'm looking for my little tick marks. I've got one up at the top right here. And then I've got the other one, which is right down here. And I'm going to align those so they are both right in the center of the track where I normally would put my paper when I want to cut it. So I'm just lining up that tick mark that I made up here, the tick mark that I made down here, and I'm making sure that they're right in the middle of that track. And of course, since I'm trying to close the little cage, that moved. All right, so there we go. They're right in the middle. I'm going to close that down. And I'm going to use my scoring blade. And I'm just going to push that. I'm not pushing hard. If you push hard enough, you can cut your paper. And that's not what I'm trying to do. I just want to get a nice scoring line. All right. And what should happen and what did happen is that diagonal score came right in the middle of those two score lines that we made before. That's exactly where I was going. So now what we need to do is a little bit of folding and burnishing, and we will have the card base for our card. Let's look at where we're going though. We need to get to a point where the card base is going to fold and collapse. That upper left-hand corner is going to work so that it folds and collapses on itself. And we have all the score lines that are going to allow us to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just start working my score lines. And I've got my bone folder, going to give that a nice little burnish just to make sure that the fibers in the paper are starting to break down. Going to do the same thing on the other score line that was at the 2 3/4. And if I reorient that, you can see that where I want this to go is I want this to fold in. Well, the diagonal score that I had is starting to work. I am not going to take my bone folder and work that diagonal fold very much right now. It is actually going to begin to work on its own. And all I'm doing is I'm working that score on each side. I'm just kind of getting it so that it's getting used to folding. And you can see that it starts folding all by itself. And when it gets to a point, I'm going to make sure those points are nice and clean. I'm just pushing those corners in just a little bit. When it gets to the stage where it's really starting to collapse, and it does it almost on its own. You're just giving it a little bit more force. Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to burnish this lightly with my fingers first. Not committing just yet. I just want to make sure everything's looking pretty good. And that's looking pretty nice to me. Now I'm going to take that bone folder and I'm going to go and press right down the middle. That's where those creases are that are underneath. And I'm going to turn it over and I'm going to do the same thing. And here's my card base. Pretty straightforward. And this is how it's going to work. I will put a panel on that front, and I'll show you in just a minute a couple little tricks of how to get that on so you don't get glue where you don't want it. And we're going to, when we open it up, we have that full unfold. Isn't that cool? So cool. All right, so we have followed this instruction. We've done everything that we need to do to get the card base. Now let's talk about the panels. At the bottom of this, that I will post on YouTube when I put everything together, and also out on my blog, which is stampedgreetings.com, you're going to see that there are measurements for the 3 card panels. You've got the first one on the front. So let's look at our 3. We've got one here. We've got one here, which is on the back of that one on front, and then we have one in the middle. Now, the reason that I said you can have, I kind of left it vague. I didn't say what colors. I said that you would do 3 color cardstock pieces cut to 4.5 by 3 1/4. That's going to be your outside piece, the one with the biggest frame. Then you're going to cut 3 color cardstock pieces to just 1/4 inch shorter and 1/4 inch less wide. And that's going to be another color. And in the case of what we're looking at, the one that is 4.5 by 3 1/4, that's in Mossy Meadow. And then the one that I have here that is 4 1/4 by 3, this is Poppy Parade. And I did that so that the colors match with the designer series paper. And then the last piece that I have is basic white, and that's cut to 4 by 2 3/4. And you can see it's just a nice framing effect. But notice something. On the front here, the larger color cardstock is that Mossy Meadow. On the inside, the larger color cardstock is Poppy Parade. So do what you want. You can kind of mix and match. I could have even brought in the mint macaron if I'd wanted to, and just give it a different pop of color. That's why I intentionally left these colors vague, but I wanted to make sure that you have the correct sizes to build up those frames. Let's talk a little bit about some suggestions of how to put the panels on and in what order. You're going to have the 3. My strong recommendation is that you put the first panel inside. And here's why. When you do that, you're going to have a visual of where that panel is when you fold the card down. I'll be able to see where the bottom right of that panel is. And that's going to give me the opportunity to put my outside panel so that it covers any hint, any peeking of the inside panel. You'll see what I'm talking about in a second. So here are my 3 pieces that I'm going to use to build the panel that's going to go on the inside. I'm not going to do anything in terms of stamping or adding embellishments to the white. I don't need to do that right now. That's kind of a nice thing about this project, is I don't have to commit to what the final design is going to look like when I'm building the card base and I'm putting the panels in. I'm just going to layer these up. And the one that I've decided that I'm going to put on the inside is going to have the larger frame in Poppy Parade and the smaller piece in Mossy Meadow. And I'm just going to go ahead and try to center those as best as I can. And again, I'm just layering 2 pieces of cardstock together. You could also experiment with designer series paper on these panels. I think that would be a really cool thing to do. There's some gorgeous designer series paper patterns that are not really large. They would give just a hint of a really nice color or a very delicate pattern if you wanted to put that on the inside. And you can always make your frame a little smaller. You know, that the one that I'm showing right now, that's the Mossy Meadow, that could be a little bit smaller. And if you use designer series paper in the back, more of the designer series paper would show. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get that inside panel to be in the middle of the area that is going to be folding down and be my card base. So if I looked on the other side of this, I'm trying to get that on the middle of that. If it's not perfect, I'm really not going to worry about it. But now when I fold this down, you're going to see that I have that little visual. I know that when I put my other panel on the front, and we'll do that in just a minute, that I need to put it so that, for example, I wouldn't put it like that. I don't want the Poppy Parade to show. I want to make sure that I'm covering up that piece so that it looks nice and clean from the front. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to build my front panel without the basic white piece. And you may have noticed that I've switched up the order of the color. On this one, I've got the Mossy Meadow in the background, and the Poppy Parade is in the front. And when you look at the designer series paper, hopefully it will make sense why I did that. On the outside, the designer series paper for this card is definitely more Poppy Parade than there's no Mossy Meadow. So I wanted that Mossy Meadow to be my frame, just to break up the color. What I want to do is I want to adhere this panel to this little flap here. I don't want to put it all over the front of the card, because if I do that, I'm not going to be able to open the card. The panel needs to just get put onto this part. There are many different ways to do that, but ultimately we just want to put glue right in here. Here's what I suggest that you do is kind of take a look at where that panel is going to need to go. And when I'm doing this, I'm looking down here in the bottom right, just to make sure I can't see any of that Poppy Parade. And then I'm going to pull that panel down, and I'm going to get my pencil out, and I'm just going to draw a little line that's kind of like two sides of a triangle. And that's going to visually show me that I can put glue below that line and not have an issue. And I can put glue to the right of that line and not have an issue. So all I did is I lined up where I want it to go, and then I pulled it diagonally. I'm pulling it diagonally and getting it out of the way, and that's going to give me a nice visual of where I can put my glue. And then I'm simply going to take some of my liquid adhesive, and I'm going to put it only on this part of my designer series paper. So in other words, I'm only going to put glue on that part that's going to move up and down. And then I'll come back in, and I'm going to do my best. Because it's liquid glue, I have a little bit of grace, just trying to find that the center kind of visually, and also make sure that down on that bottom right that I can't see the Poppy Parade. And I'm good. And since I only put glue on that panel, when I open this up, it's going to work the way it's supposed to. So as I mentioned, the first panel I suggest that you adhere is the one on the inside, then the one on the front. You have a nice way to make sure that you're putting that where you want it. And then when you put the last panel, again, just a thought and a suggestion. I do suggest, and I don't always do this, so it's kind of do as I say, not as I do, that the layering for the piece that would go on the inside, that the larger color, the larger piece, is the same as the larger piece on the front. And the reason is we're going to glue these right together. And if I happen to get this off a little bit, because these two pieces are the same color, you're not going to see it. If I use the Poppy Parade instead of the Mossy Meadow, and let's just say I got it off just a tad, you would see that, or you could see it. So it's a little more forgiving, I think, if you use the same color cardstock. So again, I'm just going to build this really quickly. And all I'm doing here is I'm going to layer these two pieces together. Nothing mystical or magical. And I'm going to add this to the back of the front piece in just a second. I'm going to be making a 21st birthday card for a very good friend of mine's grandson. And I am thinking that this kind of design will be super cool to use. I think he will get a real kick out of that. All right, so now that I have that together, I'm going to use the visual of the front panel and make sure that I get it all square when I attach the inside panel. These cards come together pretty quickly. They're definitely ones that you could do in a kind of an assembly line. And I think any kind of holiday. I was talking with some friends of mine about this design, and I think a Christmas card. I know Christmas is a ways away, but it's never too early to start making Christmas cards. And you can see that that worked pretty well. That is nice, nicely adhered in the back. All right, so that is the base. Now, I am not going to bore you to tears by asking you to watch me stamp and emboss and get things together for finishing this card, because the sky is the limit. You can do whatever you want to. I did use a couple of the products from the Country Floral Lane Suite. This is an awesome stamp set called Country Bouquet, excuse me. It is in the new mini catalog, and there are just so many options. I really like this also because with the 3 panels, I wanted to make sure that there were 3 sentiments. So you're going to see that what I did is I said, just want to say, Happy Valentine's Day, I love you. And those are the way that the message kind of flows. And then I did use the punch. I was fortunate to order this early enough to get it. I know it's on back order now. The good news is that it will be available. It won't be available for a little bit. The other good news is that the designer series paper itself is pretty forgiving if you wanted to fussy cut. And also, if you do use the stamps, they're very easy to fussy cut. So it's not a punch that is so intricate that you will not be able to fussy cut the pieces if you want to. But you can see I did some fun design on the front. I have a nice little ribbon that sort of pops up. Just did a little flag on that. Some nice little gems. And then on the inside, Happy Valentine's Day. This is the stamp. And I've got a couple of score lines just to give a little bit more character. And then down here, I love you. Again, with a couple little score lines. And then I used 2 of the stamps. This is a 2-step stamp set. I use these 2 stamps to make the heart. So those are some ideas. And again, you're going to come up with many, many more. I'll show you one more. And this is just different designer series paper, but the exact same design. And you can see I kind of got stuck with just wanted to say Happy Valentine's Day and I love you. But I did want to show you some really fun things, at least I think they're fun. These pieces, this one here and this one here, they're from my scrap designer series paper that I had when I cut paper to make these cards. And it actually came from the vertical card that I made that I'm going to show you in just a minute. So don't throw out or think about different ways that you can use that designer series paper. You're going to come up with some really, really fun ways to use it. I love these colors. I think they work together incredibly well. And it's just a fun card, just a super, super fun card. So let me turn to the vertical version of this card. We looked at how to do the horizontal. We went through that. We made this card base. The only thing I didn't do was decorate it, but we all know how to do that. So let's kind of switch our brains and for a couple minutes, think about how to take this design and make it vertical. And this is actually the vertical is the one that Brandy Cox shared at the Creative 8. Same size paper, no different in terms of the size, because when we fold it, when we pull it all together, it's going to turn into a regular A2 card. This part right here is going to end up being 5.5 by 4 1/4. So it's all the same. to start with in terms of the size of your paper. If you want to do a vertical, like the one that I have here, and you have a design that needs to go in a certain direction, in a vertical direction, make sure you pay attention to how you cut your cardstock, or not your cardstock, your designer series paper. You're going to have the 7 inches going horizontally and the 8 1/4 going vertically. Okay, so that's the primary difference. In fact, that's really honestly the only difference when you're switching up whether you're going horizontal or vertical. So this is going to look repetitive, and it is because we're using the same process that we used on the other card. And you'll remember that the first thing we did is the score line at 2 3/4. So we're going to do 2 3/4. And I'm doing this for 2 reasons. I want to show you that you can change the orientation, and I'm also refreshing your memory on what the steps are to make the card. So we did our 2 3/4. The next thing we're going to do is our second 2 3/4. Again, we're going to flip the cardstock. I keep saying cardstock, sorry, the designer series paper. Flip that to the left 90 degrees. And again, 2 3/4. So nothing is different. And it's really not different because we're constructing the way that that upper left-hand corner of the card is going to work. All right, I'm going to pull that back to the original way that I had the paper in my scoring board. So we've done this score, we've done this score. Now we need to do the diagonal. Well, I'm gonna grab my pencil again. And just like we did before, we're going to make marks on the upper line at 5 1/2 and on the left side at 5 1/2. And since I've got my scoring board, I'm just going to make it easy on myself, and I'm going to put those lines. And I'm going to come up here. I do remember that I did not erase the ones on my other card. I can go back and do that, not a problem. So I've got my tick mark at 5 1/2, my tick mark at 5 1/2. I am going to bring in my handy dandy trimmer. I still have my cutting blade out and away, which is exactly where it needs to be. I will not admit to you how many times I have either started or have completed a project, or almost completed a project. I needed to score something, put it into my paper trimmer, and used the cutting blade. That was not happy. So again, I've lined up the tick mark and the tick mark. They're right in that center of the channel. Got my scoring blade, not the cutting. And I'm just going to lightly, very lightly, going to burnish this. And I probably do this too much, but I'm being very careful that I'm doing it lightly. I'm going to go ahead and take that off. This paper is a little difficult on camera to see where the score lines are. So I think the best thing for me to do is probably fold and burnish these. And this time I'm going to remember to erase my pencil marks, and I'll go back on the other card and do that as well. It won't be a big deal. All right, so I'm going to get my bone folder, and I'm just going to go ahead and burnish my folds. I love this paper. I love the colors. They're just so delicate, and they play off each other incredibly well. There's no balmy blue on the side that has all these beautiful flowers, but it's just works. It works really, really well. So again, like we did a couple minutes ago on the horizontal one, I'm working on that little fold, or the little score that we did at the 5 1/2, and I'm just pulling it in. And because I've got that score, it's working on its own. And then I'm going to come up to that point, and I'm just going to make sure that it is folding in right at the point. I'm just using my fingernails, not very big fingernails, but using my fingernails to get it right into that point. And then I'm going to come down and just start working that together. And it's really kind of neat the way the paper will fold on itself. You don't have to do an awful lot to get this to work the way you want it to. Excuse me. And when you get it to a point that you think you're starting to love it, a great way to check and make sure that it's folding where you want it to is you can see on the side, I want that to be a straight line when it folds down. So if I kind of hold that down, and then I can start to burnish it a little bit. And you may find this one is giving me a little bit of not a challenge, it's just being a little stubborn, but stubbornness can be okay. I'm just going to work that in and make sure that my corners are nice and straight. And see how that's now folding down really well. And those corners are looking really good. So again, when it gets to that point, I'm going to use my fingers first. That's not quite as abrasive as the bone folder, just to get those fibers to continue to work and do their little magic. And I can still get it squared if I see that there's anything that's a little bit off. So I'm just working that. And then when I'm happy, I'm going to go ahead and use my bone folder, and then I'll turn it over, and I'll also use my bone folder on the other side. And now I have the card base. Super cool. The exact same thing. I am not going to bore you to tears. The exact same process is what I would use for the 3 panels. For this particular card, I would put my white panels away until I really know what I'm going to stamp or what kind of embossing folder I may want to do. And then the first one that I'm going to do is I'm going to put it on the inside. And I would take these 2 pieces, adhere them together, and then put those 2 right in the middle. Then I have my visual for the outside. I would put these 2 together, just like we did on the horizontal one. I would put that combined piece on the front, use the visual down on the right bottom to make sure that I don't see the panel on the inside. And then the last panel that would go on would be the one that would go in the upper left on the inside. And on this one, like I said before, I would suggest using the same color cardstock so that if you get things a little screwy, that you don't see the cardstock on the inside. And then save your pieces. I saved some pieces from my designer series paper. I've got some fun little cutouts that I'm going to use. I made a little flag sentiment that I'm going to end up putting on the front of that card. And I use some of the pieces from the stamp set. So all sorts of just really cool embellishments that you can put onto these cards to make them the way that you would like. When you're doing your embellishments, I really strongly recommend that the embellishments that have height, if you're using dimensionals, like I use dimensionals on the smaller flowers here. If you have a flag that you want to pop up, do that on the outside. Leave the inside panels a little flat because that will help you get this card into an envelope. And that way you won't have a lot of bulk. But that is it. I really hope that you enjoy this. I hope that you try it. You're going to love it. These cards are so much fun to make. And I really would love to see what you make from them. I promise that I will post the diagrams that I have for the vertical and for the horizontal cards. And that will give you a little bit of a visual, so you know exactly where you're going. So enjoy. And until next time, Inky hugs.